Welcome back to the Needlebook series. This series is all about slowing down, understanding our tools, and building a needlebook that truly supports hand stitching, embroidery, visible mending, and other textile work we love to do. Today we're continuing our work on the needlebook by completing the front and back covers, consisting of reinforcing and then attaching the small interior pocket to the inside of each cover, lining what will become the main larger pockets within the covers, decoratively attaching the front and back of each cover to form that pocket, which also serves to reinforce each to withstand all the wear and tear the needlebook will experience over its life. Then we'll move on to the interior pages, attaching needle labels and discussing upcoming layout and design. Our focus is on practical techniques and building a lasting and practical sewing notion. Today we get the satisfaction of completing some key elements, so let's jump in. What I've laid out here are elements we have created in the past tutorials, as well as materials we'll need in this tutorial today, namely our fabric for the interior side of the front and back cover and the little pocket that will attach to it, as well as the interfacing and fabric to line the pockets. Let's take a look at our original needle book to better see what we're working on today. This is the interior pocket. It's got a cross stitch around the perimeter, Palestrina stitch along the top, and that helps to protect that pocket. And then as well, we've got Palestrina stitch all along the top of the main pocket. And you'll see that's true again for the back cover. In this needlebook, they were identical. In my current needlebook, they're a little different, but you'll see those pockets are lined, and there is blanket stitching, Palestrina stitch all around the exterior. This is a close-up of the Palestrina stitch, and you'll see that here I used DMC floss, which lays a little flatter than sashiko thread, and it does protect that top edge from fraying on the felted wool. So that's what we'll be beginning with today, and so I'm going to teach you the Palestrina stitch, and I'm also going to, but I'd like to tell you what it is that I used in the past book, in case you're interested in that DMC floss. It is made by a company called Threadworks, and Works is W-O-R-X. I'm going to pull this label off so you can see it. Just want to be sure I pass on information you might be interested in. I didn't in the past. Threadworks, if you can see that. And the specific product is Bradley's Balloons. Yeah, and that's color code 1154 also, if that helps. But so that's what I used. Very colorful, very happy. And I used that as well for the bridging in between each of the pages themselves, the concertina pages. But that was also the Palestrina stitch along that interior pocket. So I wanted to be sure and show you. I am going to, in the second book, continue using the sashiko thread that I have used for the front and back stitching work. And it doesn't have a name. I'm going to get out my milliner number 5, and I'm going to get ready to stitch this thread. But I will give you a little peek at this thread initially. So if you can't pick it up locally, as I was fortunate enough to have done, you could order it online. The information is there on the thread. So yeah, here I took it out of its package. It doesn't have a name, as I said. The color doesn't have a name. It's called Colorful 93. That 93 is its name, if you're interested in this kind of rust reds and yellows. And as you can see, the manufacturer is Olympus. And that's a regular thickness. Sashiko thread comes in thin, regular, and thick. It equates to a size 8 pearl cotton, or about 4 strands of DMC. More or less, I think for this project 4 would be best. But be aware that sashiko thread and pearl cotton are more tightly twisted than DMC, so the individual threads of DMC floss can spread over time, and then they lay somewhat flatter, like you saw in the previous stitching of the needlebook. That's just something to be aware of if you're going for a specific look. So right now I'm looking at the materials that we'll be using next to form the interior side of the front cover. And we've got our interfacing, double-sided featherweight interfacing and our fabric. And now it's time to stitch. First thing we need to do is measure out what ultimately will be 1/8 of an inch. I measure off of 1/4 inch from the top, and this will be where our stitches that run along the edge, how deep they'll be, how far they'll go down the fabric. I measure off 1/4 of an inch and line that, and then I end up stitching, actually, because the stitches are so small, halfway between the 1/4 inch and the top, which is 1/8 of an inch. So yes, there you go. That, but I will put that on the screen here in a little bit. But I just wanted you to be aware that, so we're going to mark that interior pocket. This is our piece of felted wool. That is our interior pocket. And in order to demonstrate the Palestrina stitch, I want to go ahead and use this. You do a very close-up on a smaller piece of fabric with a shorter piece of thread, and you'll see why later. But this will just be more manageable, and I'll really be able to give you the full details of the stitch. We'll begin when we do the pocket. We'll start a little bit lower off to one side on the edge. This will get the needle to the back of the fabric, but it has to come up and over to begin, or to do our stitching. So we have to actually go in the side like that and put the knot on the front, but we'll conceal that. You'll see all of that further down in the process. But this first stitch is simply how we get going with Palestrina as an edging stitch when we only have one piece of fabric to work with. So it's a little trickier than what you'll see later on when we are using this edging stitch on 2 pieces of fabric we're stitching together. And you'll see that that loop just goes around the outside edge, and the stitch that comes out the back does not in any way interfere with that loop. And we are just prepping the area to do our Palestrina stitch. So we're going to take the needle end from right to left. We're going to go in the back under the thread, fully under that thread, but not getting any of the felted wool in there. That's sometimes the trick with this felt. It's very puffy. All right, so we have our first little knot, and you should know that everything, when we're dealing with Palestrina stitches, there are 2 knots associated with them. And so to get that second knot, we're going to hold the thread taut, wrap that thread around and behind, and then pick up that both legs there and pull the needle through to make our second knot, which will secure the stitch in position. So again, this is the preparatory first knot. This is not how all the Palestrina stitches will go, but I wanted to give you that view because that's how you'll start your pocket shortly. All right, so we've got that first knot in place, and we're ready to begin. So we place our needle back to front, coming through the back of the fabric, pulling it through towards you. That knot will remain at the top, and it will create this angled stitch. You'll see this leg of the stitch is at an angle. And there will always be, that's the working stitch. That's the one we're going to be working with. So we pass our thread around our hand, the supporting hand again, and behind, and come right to left, back through that angled stitch, that working stitch, and pull through. This will straighten that angled stitch. I have a piece of cat hair in there. And let's take a look. There's the stitch now. It is now straight up and down, no longer at an angle. And we just have to make sure the front is also straight. And then we're going to hold that stitch taut again, pass the working thread in front of our hand and around behind. And then come up in the exact same stitch. Little wiggle there. Passing right to left again. And again, we're free and clear. The needle can come right to the top edge of the fabric. We're under everything there. And then we're going to pull this second knot parallel to the fabric, and that kind of just binds off the stitch and holds it in place. There's no longer a need to hold anything taut. It's going to hold strong. Get that hair out of there. All right. So you'll always form 2 knots for each Palestrina stitch that you make. And we're going to do this again. We always enter the fabric from the back to the front. Oops, a little traffic jam there. Okay. We always, there's that angled stitch. You're always going to see that. And that's what we're going to straighten out because we want the front and the back to both look identical. So we always pass our thread, our working thread in front of our supporting hand and then around behind. Pick up that angled stitch, straighten it, hold that thread taut while we again pass the thread around our hand to the back. And to form the second knot, we pick up that same stitch that we were just working with, and we pull and put the needle through and then pull somewhat parallel to the fabric. That firms the stitch in place. Yeah, our edging stitches are always going to be 1/8 of an inch deep, which is 3.175 millimeters. And along the covers, they're always 1/4 inch apart, which is 6.35 millimeters. But in the instance of this pocket, I am eyeballing it and putting them much closer than a 1/4 inch, because much closer, because this is a small pocket and these are petite, tiny little stitches along the top edge, different from the pages and covers themselves. They need to be quite close, but you can use your judgment and place them as close or as far apart as you like. Again, we're wrapping that thread around, picking up the angled stitch, and straightening it by pulling through. It will go much faster, and you won't have to fiddle with each stitch eventually, and you'll see that. But here at the beginning, we're of course, excuse me, I'm getting that thread around, and it's not behaving. And we're going to pick up that same stitch we were just working, just as before. Oops, not quite. There we go. And then pull it through, let go of the thread and pull it parallel to the fabric, somewhat taut. Beautiful. Yeah, so the Palestrina stitch is composed of these 2 knots, and the first knot is kind of this top bump, and then the second knot is that horizontal bump. So it's quite a textural little thing. The Palestrina stitch, I think, it has Italian origins, and it's most often done on the surface of fabric, not on the edge like this, like within the embroidery or at its perimeter. So this is kind of an unusual edging, and so it's it's close in appearance to a blanket stitch, with a few extra steps, and they result in a cute little textural bump all along the rim of your work. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And now I'm trying to give you a different angle, and I'm actually working on the, am I passing that thread along front? No, I'm not. So this is an example of what you can do if you don't. See how I had to wrap the thread around? But it's best just to be consistent with your actions, particularly when you're learning. Yeah, so this gives you a different angle, and I just wanted to show you how things can look when you have kind of done it a million times. And you can see I'm just kind of deciding on the spur of the moment where these stitches are going, kind of eyeballing for consistency. Pull it through. We've got our angled stitch. Go around, back. Pardon the off of camera there, the blurriness. Pick up that angled stitch. Pull the thread through to straighten it. Hold the thread down. Pass the thread behind. Pick up that same stitch, get right under it, and then pull the thread off parallel to capture that knot. And there you have it. Get these little cute little row of bumps. I really like this stitch. Here we are at the very last one for the row. You get to see it one more time. From back to front, we've got our angled stitch. I'm going to get our thread behind, pick up the angled stitch, straighten it out, this first knot, first of two. Make sure you're staying on the edge there. Hold that taut. Pass the thread around. Pardon my finger. I'll tell you sometime about that fingernail. It's been like that my whole life. And then, is that second knot through, pull it parallel, and we have completed the full row. So the interior pocket, the small pocket, is lined and can now be affixed to the interior fabric of the front cover. But first we need to take it out, tie it off, just like we did on the other side. And remember, I showed you on the little piece of fabric, we came in from the front, and so have the knot in the front. And that's what we're doing here. We're going out, putting the knot on the front, and this knot will be fully concealed once we attach this pocket down to that interior panel of the front cover. We don't even really need to knot it here. We're going to be capturing it quite well with the cross stitch that we do along the edges, but just as an extra precaution, I put the knot in, and I left a little space so I could wrap it around behind. So here you see how those knots have been wrapped around behind. And I'm placing it kind of where I believe the pocket should be. There should be a little bit bigger of a margin at the top, so it's got a wider margin up there. And I've otherwise placed it in the middle. And go ahead and pin that down. And then we can begin our cross stitch to attach this pocket. I'm just going to show you again what it looks like in the first book. So you can see that these little X's all along the perimeter, and they're going to hold the pocket in place quite well. And the stitches won't be seen from the other side because we're lining it, and it will be a part of the pocket of the front cover. So start out this cross stitch, and I'm going to spend a little extra. Oh, so yeah, I bring the stitch in on the fabric itself, and then on the pocket fabric, and then every stitch that goes across is actually just off of the fabric into the pink. So we're going from the mustard to the pink, the mustard to the pink each time. And I do a few reinforcing, a little extra reinforcing stitch at this top corner, just to make sure, because it's going to get a lot of the wear and tear of reaching in and out of that pocket as you retrieve things. And I'm just going to get this going for you. I think you're all probably pretty familiar with this stitch, but and so I won't be showing you every stitch, but I'm going to get it going a little bit. I ran into the knot back there. One last reinforcement there. All right, and now we move down. And this stitch, when I cross over to the pink, is actually going to conceal that little thread that had the knot that I wrapped around behind. So it's disappeared now and won't be seen. You can do it that way if you choose, or you can simply not knot it at all, because these stitches will catch the line of stitching and won't let anything unravel. So I'm going to move along and stitch the entire 3 sides of this pocket to the backing fabric. I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but the sashiko thread is regular thickness. Did I say that? The sashiko comes in thin, regular, and thick. This is regular. And all this thread, you need a lot to get all the way around, and it causes a lot of of heartache bunching up, which is why in that little tutorial section I just had a short piece of thread. Okay, I think we're going to be jumping ahead shortly, but you're getting the idea. You can think of these videos as a stitch along rather than a tutorial if you like, and since I'm making it along with you, this second book. The full needlebook series is linked below. So check that out if you'd like to continue stitching together, and I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing. So we're finishing up here, final cross stitches. Just running out of thread, so it's kind of perfect. Okay, there we go. And we'll just knot this off. So there we have it, interior of the front cover, back side of the front cover. So it's time to get this lined. The interfacing, again, it's featherweight and doubly sticky on both sides once you iron it. This is the fabric I chose to line the pockets on this needle book. So that big main pocket is going to be lined similar to the cover, and it will piece together like this. And then we'll attach it with our purl stitches along the sides. But before we do that, we have to do the top edge. And before we do the top edge, we have to attach this lining to the back of the front cover. So time to get the iron out and do that. A little close up here so you can see the Palestrina along the top, cross stitches along the sides. Yep, it functions. Okay, let's get that ironed. I always say it, but it's a good idea to have a piece of fabric between your iron and any time you're working with interfacing, so that you, in case there's some overlap, and there often is, and you don't think there is, there's some little tendrils hanging out one side or another, and it sticks to your iron. So just attaching that down. And then after you attach the lining to the cover, you want to be sure and trim it up, though there's always some, even the fabric will hang over the edges and such, so we're going to trim that, get it all squared away. Then it'll be ready for its decorative stitching and attaching to the front cover. Okay, it's been all trimmed up. And now, because we're going to be attaching these two along three sides, the top side is going to need to remain obviously separate to access the pocket. So each piece, the front and the back of this cover, are going to be stitched separately just on that top edge, just as this one was. I love those bumps. Can't resist. Yeah, so there we go. All edging stitches are a 1/4 inch apart, which is 6.4 millimeters. So we do some measuring. And, you know, after we stitch along the top, remember, we'll then put the two sides together and stitch the remaining 3 edges to attach them to themselves. And therefore, just on one of the pieces, the front or the back, and in this instance I'm using the front to get the stitches extra clean on the front, we're going to need to mark all the way around, because we're going to need stitches all the way around on this on the cover piece. We are stitching all the way around ultimately once it comes to attaching. I think that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to you. All right, so now we can do the Palestrina stitch along the top edge of the cover, the front cover. And because we have two fabrics effectively, because we have merged, we have a lining on the back of this, we can, so again, I come in a bit low on the right-hand side there, further down in the fabric, so that the knot is hidden in the side seam. So we won't ever see that knot once we attach the two pieces together, the front and the back of this cover. Now we've got, so as I was saying, we've got two fabrics. We've got the lining and then the front piece of wool felt. So we don't have to do the tricks we did with the pocket before. We can come up, we put the needle up behind and in the middle between the front of the fabric, of the wool felt and the lining. So we're coming up in the middle. We're sandwiched. The needle is sandwiched in between the two pieces of fabric. Oh, it's a little, that fabric is woven pretty tightly for my big amount of thread I pull through each time. So we've come up just like that and formed a little knot by wrapping that thread around. And then we're forming our second knot. And we've got the beginnings of our Palestrina stitch. So remember, the first stitch in any of these is always a little different from your standard basic stitch. So from here on out, so that's how you start along the top edge. And then from here on out, we're doing our basic standard Palestrina stitch. We work from back to front. Looks like my dots didn't come out on the line. There we go. Oh, another little traffic jam there. Got a lot of thread on this one. So we work from back to front. We have our angled stitch, so pardon my finger again, but we pick up that angled stitch in the back to form our first knot and to pull that stitch straight. And don't worry, I'm not going to show you every stitch I make on this. I'm just getting you started. I want to be sure you're off to a good start. And then we go back and pick up that same working stitch after wrapping the thread. This gives us our second knot in the Palestrina stitch. We pull it parallel. We get that nice bump. Secure it down. Okay, and we're off to the races. The next stitch, from back to front. Little jump there. I think I got interrupted. So from back to front. Wrap our thread around to the back. Pick up the angled stitch. We'll form our first knot, and there we jump to the end. Back to front. Last stitch in the row. Pick up our angled stitch. Tie our first knot, which straightens the back stitch so that it too looks as straight as the front. Hold that thread taut, back around, pick up that working stitch again. It's easier with the lining fabric there. You don't get all that felt caught in the needle. And then pull it somewhat parallel. Do I do that? Yes, I do. And that's the final knot along the top. So the top edge is done on this front cover. And now to exit, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go down right next to that knot between the lining and the felt. And come out in the fabric along the edge, a little further down. That's going to be hidden, the seam, so no one will see, and we'll make our little knot there. And I don't think you need to see that. For some reason, I filmed it. But it is informative to see where the knot lands. So the top edge is done. There's a little close-up of it. Very similar to that first needlebook. Looks identical. And now we need to do the top edge of this one. Once we've done the top edge of this one, then we're ready to stitch the front and back together, which will form the main pocket of the cover. So that's the next step. And to do that, don't worry, I'm not going to show you every step, but just have to mark this one. And then we're doing that same, because I want to be sure that you can do this on your own. And we're coming up in between the lining, coming out at the first stitch location where the first stitch should be. And I think what I'll do is I'll just put the little reminders for the stitch in the description box for you. Just like a couple word reminders about what you think about when you're doing the stitch itself, the Palestrina stitch, the edging stitch. It's a little different. All right, so fix that knot. Come up in between the fabric. It forms the first knot. Hold the thread down, go back into that same working stitch, and form the second knot of the Palestrina stitch. Sorry, it was off camera there. And then we're off to the races with the rest of this. I've not done a tutorial before, and I'm trying to be thorough, not too repetitive. I'm trying to summarize things. And if you, I'd love your feedback. If you care to comment and let me know how I'm doing or how I could improve, I'd be happy to take the advice. So we're finishing. This is the last stitch on the top. Great, and then we're going to go down next to the knot, in between the two pieces of fabric, out the side, knot it off in the seam area. Oops. Scoot over a little bit. There we go. Yeah, if this tutorial is helpful, it'd be truly kind of you to like and subscribe, because that helps make the channel more visible to potential new viewers, and at the same time it helps you to find your way back easily to these tutorials as they become available. So consider that if you would. Top edges are done. Now, voila, we are going to, you see those two knots there, those are from our, that we just formed. Now we are going to come in between the two the front and back panels of the front cover and begin our binding of these two pages together, two pieces together to form the front cover. I'm just making sure we're all lined up. Everything's kind of perfect. We're going to use the dots on this front cover as our guide in stitching all around the three sides. So, yeah, I'm pinning them together here. I think I poked myself. Yeah. I won't show you every stitch, of course, but I will show you how I started out and how I round the corners, because that tends to be a tricky thing for folk when they're learning a new blanket stitches. How do you form the corners? How do you start? How do you end? That sort of thing. And so now I'm just going back into the working stitch here. This is the first one, and we're back to working against felt, so it's a little tricky picking up the, sorry, that's slow, picking up the felt. So don't get the felt, just get the full stitch though. And we'll form that knot, that second knot. And we're ready to proceed all the way around the perimeter. Again, back to front. Oh, this is where the dots aren't quite on the line, so I go right above the dot, but in the same location as the dot should have been. That's why you see that. And you're getting to be Palestrina experts now. So I won't even talk about the steps that you're seeing, though if you said them out loud, maybe it would be helpful. Just trying to separate those two knots. Okay. Just get the thread if you can. We'll be jumping here to the corner in a mere few seconds. Okay. So here we are at the corner. And we're doing your standard moves. getting that second knot in. And now we're ready to do our first stitch going the other direction. So we'll be utilizing the same hole we did for the last stitch on the other side. And oh, got a little traffic jam. Okay, now our angled stitch is now over on the other side. And so what you want to do in that case is, just a moment, there we go, is pick up that angled stitch. It looks very odd way over there. And yeah, get all the way under it. Yeah, you know, if you can't get under a stitch, it's always good to just go backwards and go under with the eye all the way, or use it to make a pathway available to you to do so. And it would be best if I was following my little rules and I held the thread down here. Okay, so you see that angled stitch is still a mess. We couldn't straighten it out, and we're not going to. What we're going to do is take that angled thread and put it in between the two pieces of fabric. It'll be held on either side and held taut, but I like that square look to the edges. You'll see in the needle book above my hands there, each edge has a little squared off opening. So we see we're getting that thread and we're slipping it in between the two linings. And then when we pull it taut and pull our knot in, it's held tight there. And so it leaves a little pink corner there. And up we go, the next side. Tying our second knot in that corner stitch that we are in the midst of creating. All right, and now we're, my finger cramped. My fingers go straight sometimes and they won't bend. Does that ever happen to you guys? Leave me a comment if your fingers ever cramp up like that. I don't know why that happens. Anyway, off we go. And we're not going to waste our time going over the stitch anymore. Oh, I had a little thread poke out, so I'm just tucking it back in. And then I'm tying that last stitch, the last corner. I am doing the second knot on it. And then I'm just going to show you, the reason we're here is, we're back at the top again. I'm going to just show you how I end it for this cover. I don't even, we don't knot it. We just, well, we'll take a look at the cover first and then I'll show you. But there it is, complete. I think it looks a lot better with the edging. The dahlia stands out somehow more. And here's the back of the front cover. And here is our sweet little pocket, our main pocket. Turned out rather cute. So I'll rethread this and then I'm just going to run it down the side, in between, in and out of the fabric lining and the felt itself, but without ever, breaking the surface. Just running it through, it'll catch and will never come loose. And then pull it through. and if you cut that off, you're golden. You've probably seen plenty of people and they're stitching this way, but just in case you haven't. Our cover is complete. Beautiful. Okay, it's Very, my daughter. My daughter who is 19. I showed her toddler picture, but realized I never told you that she's now 19. So, yeah, she'll get some use out of this. I'm not making this for a toddler. And here we are side by side, how we started out. Just wanted you to see the two. I need to iron the yellow one so that the ink marks disappear. And so now you're going to be repeating the same thing. So you're getting real good at this. You're going to be repeating the same thing for the back cover. We've made the front of the back cover already, but we haven't made the back of the back cover. So I've just very briefly spelled it out here. You measure and mark your top edge of your pocket. You stitch that top edge with the Palestrina stitch. Attach that little pocket to the back cover. Apply the interfacing when it's fully attached. Apply the lining fabric. And go ahead and iron it so that they're fully attached. That also reinforces the back page as well. And you tidy it all up. So you're going to have. Then you measure, you take the cover of the back and you measure all the way around. You make your marks so that you can stitch based off of the cover itself. But you're going to stitch the top edges first of both pieces. Then you're going to put the two pieces together, lining sides, and stitch them together. And then you end up with the back cover. This is what the back cover looks like when complete. Yours, of course, will look totally different. Different color choices, different threads, etc. But same overall concept. Lovely. And so now we are ready to kind of lay the foundation for our needle pages themselves. So we're going to do a little bit of planning, and I'm going to give you some food for thought for our next tutorial, tutorial number 5. And that's where we'll head right now. So get your labels out that you made in the previous tutorial. And I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. I've got 9, and I think I'm going to have 3 blank pages. Remember, it's always nice to have a few buffer pages. And your number of pages are going to be totally different depending on your needles and how many blank pages you'd like. But because I'm going to have 12 individual pieces of felt, I'm going to have 6 pages, because remember, the needle book portion, where the needles live within the book, they are attached one to another via interfacing, just like we did on the cover. And so you won't have multiple sides to each page. There's no pocket in between, is what I'm saying. So what I'm doing here is I'm matching colors that I like together, and kind of thinking about what order these pages will go in. You'll see one page after another as you flip through, so I just don't want any kind of repeats on the same side. I want some kind of colors that look nice together and look nice following each other. It's not super important, but it's just a nice consideration to make. And each of these pieces, again, are 4 by 4 inches or 10 by 10 centimeters. So we made these, we talked about these, and I think cut them in a previous tutorial. So you're just going to kind of make some pairs and then think about the order of those pairs within the book. And then we're going to go ahead and together we'll put on one label. And then your homework will be to add more labels, add all your labels. Let's take a look at how these pages look. So there's a couple blues in in a row, so I'm going to probably flip one of those over, put the blue on top. I have a lot of blues in this book. And that should be fine. So that looks okay. Yeah, so then we'll put one of the labels on together here in this session, and then over until the next tutorial comes, you can attach your other labels and be thinking about the shapes of the felted wool that you would like on each page. Remember, the needles live poked into a piece of wool felt, and I used some whimsical shapes in my original book. In this version of my book, the yellow book, it's going to be, I think I'm going to use all flower shapes. So I've included in the next, after we do the stitching here, I've included a page of shapes that I used either last time or will be using in this current book. And you can take a screenshot of it and use those shapes or create your own shapes. Maybe you want to do all fruit shapes. Well, anyway, let's look at this page. I've whip stitched the label on using pearl cotton, and I left a gap between where the edging stitches will go and where the label goes. So we got to take all that into consideration. Want to leave space for the shape below and for the stitches above. So I think I'll stitch on this chenille label, and I'll think about where the stitches will end on this pink page and kind of center it, kind of eyeball it a little bit. It's not cut too well. It's kind of cattywampus. And I don't mind the frayed edges. I'm just going to pull these loose threads off, and then I'll clean it up a little bit. I didn't cut that out very well. And then we'll start stitching here with pearl cotton, you with whichever. Maybe you want to use the same thread you stitched the label with, the word itself, the needle name, or maybe you want to use a complementary color to the felt that you're attaching it to. So you have some choices to make here. I'm just going to use white. I'm going to make it kind of disappear or not be a feature of this book. It's just going to blend in. So again, I'm not going to do all these. We won't have to do all these whip stitches together, but I'm going to get you started. At the corners, I angle out so that it catches the whole corner, especially with this fabric that's falling apart. It's an old sheet that I used, and it's losing its warp and its weft. Okay, so yeah, I'm just doing a few whip stitches at each end, one at each corner, and then spacing them out appropriately along the length. We're only going to do a couple here. I got a big spool of this pearl cotton from a thrift shop, and I think it's going to take a lifetime to use it all. So I try and use it every chance I get. It's one of those industrial size spools. And I'm adding new needlebook tutorials slowly and thoughtfully, and I hope you'll consider subscribing, because it's the simplest way to stay connected to this kind of hand stitching and textile work if it resonates with you. And I would really appreciate it if you did. And if you're still here, you probably already have. Yeah, I love any feedback or comments. There's things you wish I covered more or less or differently. Please let me know. I'm just learning how to teach really online, so I'd appreciate your feedback. All right, and so that's attaching the labels. You do those for next session. And poor decrepit little label is on. Not too straight. But that's all right. And then the back side of this page is going to be that color, and I'll put darner on the other side. And then these are the shapes I've used. I'm going to use a bunch of these flower shapes. I used a few of them last time. Take a screenshot if you'd like, and you'll want to determine how big you'd like them. Just be thinking about your shapes, and we'll do this next time together. And I appreciate you for still being here. Take care. Bye.